how in the Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, some are not." He was pointing to one of the most powerful mental tools a human being can possess, the ability to separate the controllable from the uncontrollable. In life, so much of our energy is lost in resisting things that we can never change: other people, opinions, the passage of time, the outcomes of events that have already happened. When you step into a new chapter in life, this truth becomes even more essential. There will be challenges, setbacks, and moments when the world seems indifferent to your plans. The Stoic approach is not to ignore these realities, but to meet them with clarity. Focus your effort entirely on what lies within your sphere of influence, and learn to release the rest without bitterness. This principle doesn't mean apathy. It's not about sitting back and letting life happen to you. On the contrary, it demands greater action, but action in the right places. If something is within your control, your thoughts, your words, your choices, then it deserves your full commitment. You can decide how to respond to a problem, how to carry yourself when disappointed, and what meaning to assign to the events in your life. These are the levers you can pull. Everything else is the weather. You can't change it, but you can decide whether to carry an umbrella or stand in the rain. One of the greatest benefits of this mindset is that it strips away wasted effort. Imagine pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. That's what happens when you try to control the uncontrollable. You end up drained, frustrated, and no closer to your goal. But when you channel that energy toward things you actually can shape, the results compound over time. Your skills improve, your habits strengthen, and your resilience grows. You become less reactive and more deliberate, no longer jerked around by every external shift in circumstance. This is not an overnight change. The mind will always try to drift toward what it fears or resents. The key is to catch yourself in that drift and ask the question, is this in my control? If the answer is yes, act decisively. If the answer is no, redirect your energy immediately to something that is. This single habit, repeated daily, will free you from a great deal of unnecessary suffering. The Stoics practice this principle in every sphere of life. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under constant threat of war and plague. Yet he reminded himself each morning that he couldn't control the day's events, only his own conduct. Seneca faced exile and political hostility, yet he devoted his efforts to philosophy, writing, and personal virtue because those were within his command. Epictetus was born a slave, yet he chose to focus on his reasoning, his integrity, and his self-mastery rather than on the injustices he couldn't undo. Their lives are proof that the greatest power we have is not over the world, but over ourselves.
The Stoics saw obstacles not as roadblocks, but as raw material for achievement. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way," capturing the essence of this mindset. The idea is simple but profound. Every difficulty carries within it the opportunity to grow, to adapt, to transform. When you encounter resistance in life, it is not an interruption of your progress. It is the very means by which you progress. The muscles of the body grow stronger by meeting resistance, and the same is true for the muscles of the mind and spirit. Without trials, there is no testing of character, no sharpening of skills, no reason to evolve into a stronger version of yourself. This principle is especially powerful when beginning anew. Starting over is rarely a smooth, straight path. There will be unexpected setbacks, financial struggles, loss of support, personal doubt, external criticism. The default reaction for most people is frustration or withdrawal, to see the obstacle as proof they were wrong to start. The Stoic approach rejects this impulse. Instead, it asks, how can this be used? The obstacle is reinterpreted as a teacher, a forge for resilience, a sharpening stone for resourcefulness. If something blocks the original route, you adapt and make the obstacle itself part of the journey forward. In practice, this mindset reframes every problem as a form of training. A failed plan forces you to develop better strategies. Harsh criticism builds emotional resilience and teaches discernment about whose opinions truly matter. A shortage of resources compels you to innovate and do more with less. Each situation that initially appears as a setback can, through the lens of this philosophy, become the very reason you develop the abilities and perspective necessary for long term success. By leaning into the challenge rather than avoiding it, you convert adversity into an advantage. The deeper wisdom in this principle is that life is never without obstacles. If you believe progress only happens in their absence, you will spend most of your time waiting, not moving. The Stoics understood that since obstacles are inevitable, the most rational approach is to expect them, prepare for them, and when they arrive, engage with them fully. This prevents the emotional shock that paralyzes so many people when difficulties arise. Instead of seeing problems as proof that the world is against you, you recognize them as a natural part of the process, something built into the very structure of growth itself. It also builds a kind of inner calm. When you stop demanding that life be smooth, you stop being disturbed when it isn't. You move forward with a readiness that others mistake for luck or fearlessness. But in truth, it comes from understanding that the obstacle in front of you is not separate from your path, it is your path. By embracing this, you stop resisting the inevitable friction of life and start using it as the very force that moves you forward. Ask ChatGPT. You ask ChatGPT. To the Stoics, freedom was never about doing whatever you please whenever you please. That kind of freedom is an illusion because it leaves you at the mercy of impulses, cravings, fears, and habits you cannot control. True freedom is the ability to govern yourself, to act according to reason rather than compulsion. Self discipline is the key to achieving that kind of inner liberty. It is the ability to choose what is right over what is easy, to maintain your course when distraction or temptation tries to pull you away. Without self discipline, you are a prisoner of whatever desire or mood happens to dominate you in the moment. When beginning a new chapter in life, the temptation to drift or delay can be strong. The uncertainty of change can make comfort seem more appealing than progress. Self discipline counters this by creating a structure you can rely on, a set of actions you commit to, regardless of how you feel. It becomes the anchor that keeps you steady when emotions or external events threaten to knock you off course. This is not about rigid control for the sake of control. It is about building the habits that move you toward the life you want without relying on bursts of motivation that may never arrive. Self discipline starts with clarity about your priorities. If you know what matters most, it is easier to say no to what distracts you. Without that clarity, discipline feels like deprivation, as though you are denying yourself pleasure for no reason. The Stoic sees it differently. Every moment of indulgence that pulls you from your principles is a trade of long-term freedom for short-term comfort. By training yourself to act in alignment with your values rather than your impulses, you create a sense of stability that no external condition can take away. The benefits extend far beyond productivity. Self-discipline sharpens the mind, strengthens the body, and calms the emotions. When you commit to regular practice, whether that is study, physical exercise, meditation, or any other discipline, you develop not just skill but resilience. You become less swayed by mood, less dependent on ideal conditions. This steadiness builds confidence because you know you can rely on yourself to follow through. The very act of choosing discipline is a declaration that you are not a victim of circumstance but the active director of your own actions. The Stoics trained this through daily habits and voluntary hardship, by practicing restraint when they could have indulged, by enduring discomfort they could have avoided. They strengthened their will like a muscle. Each act of self-control reinforced their sense of independence. They understood that a person who cannot say no to themselves is never truly free, no matter how many external liberties they possess. Self-discipline transforms freedom from something that must be granted by others into something that lives entirely within your own control. Ask ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT. You ask ChatGPT. The Stoics taught that the mind is the command center of life, the place where perception is formed, judgments are made, and actions are decided. If that command center is weak, undefended, or overrun by harmful influences, then no amount of external success or favorable circumstance can bring lasting peace. To guard your mind like a fortress means to be deliberate about what you allow to enter your thoughts, because what enters shapes what stays, and what stays shapes the course of your life. Just as a city with open gates invites enemies to walk in unchallenged, a mind left unguarded is vulnerable to fear, envy, anger, and distraction. In a world of constant noise, guarding the mind requires intentional effort. Information streams in from every direction: news headlines, social media feeds, other people's complaints and judgments. Without awareness, these influences seep into your thinking, coloring your view of the world without your consent. The Stoic approach is to take the role of gatekeeper seriously, to question whether each idea, opinion, or piece of information deserves entry. This is not isolation, it is curation. You're responsible for maintaining an environment within your own mind where reason and virtue can thrive. Part of guarding the mind is recognizing the subtlety of influence. Not all threats are obvious. Some arrive disguised as entertainment, as well meaning advice, or as small habits of thought that seem harmless at first. Over time, these can erode focus, breed resentment, or foster dependency on external validation. The Stoics would counter this with regular self-examination, catching harmful patterns early before they grow roots. Just as a fortress is inspected for weak points, the mind must be checked for cracks in discipline or clarity. Another aspect is controlling self-talk, because the words you use inside your own head shape your emotional state as much as anything from the outside. If the voice in your mind constantly repeats messages of doubt, complaint, or defeat, those thoughts become the architecture of your inner world. Guarding the mind means replacing unhelpful narratives with ones grounded in truth, responsibility, and perspective. The Stoics often wrote to themselves, reinforcing the values they wanted to live by and pushing back against mental drift. This protection also extends to the people you allow close. Just as a fortress would be careful about who holds the keys to its gates, you must be mindful of who influences your thinking. Conversations, friendships, and relationships can either strengthen your resolve or weaken it. Surrounding yourself with those who encourage reason, virtue, and discipline makes the work of guarding the mind far easier, while exposure to those who feed cynicism, indulgence, or fear makes it harder. Guarding the mind is not about living in fear of intrusion, it is about preserving clarity so you can meet life on your own terms. A well guarded mind remains calm when provoked, focused when distracted, and steady when chaos rises outside its walls. In this way, your inner world becomes a place of stability that no outside force can breach. Ask ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT.
Seeing it as the only time in which action is possible. The past is fixed beyond alteration. The future is uncertain and outside our grasp, but right now is entirely available to us. To act now is to recognize that waiting for perfect conditions is a form of procrastination disguised as preparation. The truth is that conditions are rarely perfect, and the longer you delay, the more momentum you lose. Every meaningful change, every shift in direction, begins not with an idea or a plan, but with a step taken in the moment you are in. The call to act now is a call to cut through hesitation, fear, and overthinking in order to seize the opportunity that exists only in the present. When starting fresh, the temptation to wait for more clarity or more confidence can feel reasonable. You may tell yourself you need more resources, more time, or more certainty before you begin. Yet the Stoics understood that action itself is often what creates clarity. Movement reveals the terrain in a way standing still never can. Small steps forward, taken immediately, often illuminate the path more than months of speculation. By acting now, you turn intention into reality, even if the action feels imperfect or incomplete. There is also a deeper discipline in immediate action. It demands that you override the inertia of comfort and the pull of distraction. The human mind is skilled at manufacturing reasons to delay, from rehearsing worst-case scenarios to indulging in the illusion that tomorrow will be easier. Acting now cuts through that illusion. It shifts the focus from thinking about doing something to actually doing it. Each time you respond to an opportunity or a challenge without unnecessary delay, you reinforce the habit of decisiveness and weaken the habit of hesitation. Acting now does not mean being reckless or impulsive. It is not about rushing into situations without thought, but about avoiding the trap of endless preparation. There is a balance between planning and doing, and the Stoics leaned toward action because they knew that time is the most precious resource we have. Seneca warned that much of life is wasted in waiting, and that those who delay often discover they have run out of time before they have truly begun. By training yourself to respond promptly to what needs to be done, you respect the finite nature of your days. Immediate action also builds resilience because it forces you to engage with reality as it is, not as you imagine it might be. Once you take a step, you must deal with the actual consequences, adapt to real feedback, and navigate genuine challenges. This direct engagement strengthens both skill and character, while inaction leaves them undeveloped. Momentum grows with each action taken, and that momentum becomes a force of its own, carrying you further than you might have believed possible when you first began. Ask ChatGPT.